We never would have believed that we had to make a decision whether we would go ahead with our son's wedding while his brother, our son, was unaccounted for at the time.
Hi, thank you so much for joining us today. Can you start by introducing yourself, your name, where you're from, and a little bit about what you do?
My name is Doron Perez. I'm a rabbi, and I have the privilege of being the executive chairman of the World Mizrachi movement. My accent is a South African accent. We were privileged to make Aliyah, my wife and I, and our 4 children 9 years ago. Actually in the middle of another war, protective edge, Tzuk Eitan, it just worked out that way. And we live in a place called Yad Binyamin for the last 9 years.
For those who don't know, can you tell us about how you and your family have been affected by the events of October 7th?
Yeah, October 7th, Simchat Torah, was a very difficult day for Klal Yisrael. It was a difficult day for our family. By the end of the day, let's say by about 12 o'clock at night that evening, we had one son in Soroka Hospital in Beersheba who had been injured, and another son who we had had no contact with since that day. Our older son, Yonatan, was shot through the leg in battles in the south. Thankfully went through his thigh and didn't cause the damage that it could have. A friend of his was shot almost in the same place, but 1 centimeter lower, and bled to death. So we're very, very blessed that his injury was only, so to speak, a light to moderate one, where he missed everything, thankfully. So he was in Soroka Hospital. He's an officer in the paratroopers. Our other son, who's also an officer in tanks, was unfortunately 3 members of his tank the whole tank had no connection with anyone for the whole day. By the next day, we knew that unfortunately 1 was killed in the tank and 3 were missing in action, which was subsequently defined a number of weeks later as taken hostage. So we had 1 injured son and another who was taken hostage.
How is that experience, having 2 sons in the army? I'm sure it comes with a lot of pride, but I'm sure there are other emotions as well.
As my wife says, it's one thing we made Aliyah. It's another thing that they're both going to the army. It's another thing that they're both fighters. And it's another thing that they both sign on in the permanent force. Let your parents sleep at night a little bit. But of course, nothing really prepared us for October 7th. But I will say that we are very, very grateful and proud that we have 2 boys who chose to go to the army, who chose to go to fighting units, who are both officers in the Israeli army. It comes an enormous amount of pride and gratitude, but of course, a lot of angst, as I would say hundreds of thousands of homes in Israel today where soldiers are on the front line. Over 1,200 have been lost, unfortunately, still 140 as of this recording in captivity, including our son Daniel, and hundreds of thousands fighting. So there's a huge amount of angst at this time, having children in the army. So it's all together. It's both the tremendous gratitude and pride for having a Jewish country, for having young men who prepared to put their lives on the line to defend it, but enormous angst at what we're dealing with.
I know recently you made a simcha, a wedding for your son. Can you tell us about that process, how it came to be and what made you go ahead with this beautiful occasion?
Yeah, it's incredible the contradictory circumstances life puts you in. We never would have believed that we had to make a decision whether we would go ahead with our son's wedding while his brother, our son, was unaccounted for at the time. As of the 7th of October, Simchat Torah, our son Yonatan was engaged then to Galia, and Daniel was on the front lines for Shabbat. He was in his tank with his tzevet, with his crew on that Shabbat, and Yonatan was at home. Yonatan went into the army on that day, meaning he had been at home, and when he heard from his officers what was going on in the south, he went straight into the battles, and was in the battles for about 6 hours, and then was eventually injured in the area, the base known as Nachal Oz. So that was his 6 hours in the fighting, but he was engaged at the time. Once we knew that our son Daniel was missing in action, and we knew that definition, we were told, was not going to change for a while. The reason it's missing in action and not, let's say, taken captive is because they didn't have any camera footage or any eyewitness testimony. Many of the hostages from the first moment, there's some soldiers from 7:10 in the morning already were taken across the border, and there's evidence of that, be it video, be it eyewitness. There's, until today, none of that with our, it's now, as of this interview, it's over 60 days. And there's no evidence of no eyewitnesses, no videos. But from the circumstantial evidence of all the intelligence gathering, there's enough to say that they're in Gaza. But we don't, there's been, nothing that we know for sure, let's say it like that. So he was missing in action for a number of weeks. And once we heard by the Thursday after Simchat Torah that he was missing in action, and that would take a few weeks until that would change, we had a decision to make. Our son, Yonatan, is supposed to be married 5 days later on Or Le Gimel Mar Cheshvan on the Tuesday, the 17th of October. What do? We didn't know what to do. And I often tell the story that his commanding officer, a traditional man from Tel Aviv, came to visit him and said to him, Yonatan, what are you going to do with the wedding? He said, I don't know. And I said to the officer, Hamfaked, Mata Choshev, what do you think? He says, Ani Omer, he says, Titchaten hayom be'erev. He said, get married tonight, al madecha, in your uniform. And then he said the following word, Am Yisrael tzarich smachot. The Jewish people need simchas. He said, we've got enough difficulty, we need simchas. So I said to him, Hamfaked, is that a command? He said, it's not a command. So I said, he's not going to do it. But when he left, we discussed amongst ourselves, as hard as it was having Daniel missing in action, what were we going to do? Push off the wedding indefinitely? There's a war going on. So wedding should take place. So we decided together with Galia and Yonatan and her parents, and my wife was very much pushing for it. She said, this is a religious young couple. Now's the time, even if, as hard as it is, even if it's going to be a small simcha, let's do the chuppah now in a small simcha. And that's what we did. So we canceled the wedding in Ashkelon, the big hall. We had a small wedding in Yad Binyamin, where we live. Our friends, the ladies of Yad Binyamin, put together an unbelievable wedding from scratch in 5 days. And it was unbelievable. It was maybe 150 people, which was more than what it should have been. But there were big air raid shelters there. It was in the high school where they actually both studied at for a different period in their first year. And it was unbelievable. It was an unbelievable wedding. And I can say there's a pasuk in Tehillim which says, "Vegilu birada," to be joyful in your trembling. And it was those things. The most profound feeling I had was that it is possible to hold incredible angst, fear, and trembling, together with incredible gratitude, happiness, simcha. On the one hand, we have a son who is able to get married having been injured. There are many, many people who've lost multiple family members. So to have a son who fought for 6 hours with many of his friends, either killed, God forbid, or badly injured, and he being saved by Hashem, that literally only a light to moderate injury, is an incredible miracle in and of itself. So the fact that we could have a wedding, the fact that we have a son who was saved, albeit with an injury, is an unbelievable chesed of Hashem. And I believe the curse of life shouldn't cancel the bracha that a person has. So there's a bracha. And yes, there's a certain curse that we're dealing with, a challenge that our son is missing. But I saw that, it's possible to hold them both together. I wouldn't have thought that it is, but it is. And there was trembling, there was angst and a lot of pain, but mainly simcha. It was incredible simcha. And I will say that, quote one of our friends, Tammy Goldberg, she was at their wedding. She said for her, it was the holiest, saddest, happiest wedding she was ever at. And somebody added, and the most inspirational. It was mainly, Bela, it was mainly happy. It was a very, very happy wedding. It was one where there were tears of pain under the chuppah when the rabbi, who was the Masader Chuppah V'Kiddushin, was running the wedding, mentioned the fact that we can't begin the wedding, he said tearfully, without acknowledging Daniel, who's not here, and that wherever he is, he's celebrating with us. And that was a very, very painful moment. We said Tehillim under the chuppah. It was very, very, those few minutes were very, very difficult and painful. The thought that Daniel's not there, the prayers for Daniel. But we wiped away our faces. My wife was stronger than I brought her tissues. She was standing on the other side, and I realized that she needed to give me tissues. We were both crying, but I was actually struggling more. Baruch Hashem, it was an incredible simcha, a little bit of pain, some challenge, but mainly happy. We hope and pray that Daniel will come back and we'll have another big reception for him and redo the dancing of the wedding with him, but it really was, it was very special.
It's interesting you talk about this sort of like dichotomy and tension, two different emotions at the same time. You know, at every Jewish wedding, we break a glass. So there's always that mix of bittersweet. As long as the Jewish people are in exile, there is that, you know, two sides. So I'm curious, as somebody who experienced it so acutely in such a real way, what would you say to people around the world who are also struggling with this balance of tough times? It's hard to remain faithful and still believe, but also to be joyous about what we have.
So I'll tell you the following, two things. A lady who actually somehow saw the wedding or heard about the wedding contacted me through mutual friends. Unfortunately, her daughter passed away tragically a number of years ago after some really difficult experiences. And her son was getting married, and she didn't know how she was dreading the chuppah. She wasn't sure how she was going to get through this with the tragic death of her daughter. And she heard about our wedding, and she heard about my wife and us, so she contacted us. And we spoke to her and said to her that not only should she not dread the wedding, she should look forward to it. And Hashem will give her the kochot, just as he gave us the kochot. We're just regular people. He gave us the kochot to have an incredible wedding, and he will give her the kochot. We have been through it. And as I said, the pain doesn't cancel out the happiness, and the challenge and the curse doesn't cancel out the bracha. The human heart is very expansive, and it's able to contain both. And especially us as the Jewish people, who as a people have experienced so much of this dichotomy of life. And I sent her WhatsApp on the day of the wedding as well. And she contacted me afterwards, and she said it was an unbelievable wedding. She was able to do it. We are able to do it. And here's my message. I don't know if there's one person who stands under the chuppah who doesn't have a measure of pain, of loss. Is there ever a chuppah that everyone's present? All family members, all grandparents, all siblings, all children, all first cousins. There's so much pain and suffering in the world in general. Sometimes I say that I wonder, if sometimes parents stand under the chuppah and not sure how they're going to pay for the wedding, and have got angst to think of what debt they're going into and what's going to happen. Please God, they've got other children to marry off. So everyone's got a measure of challenge in their life, be it shalom bayit, be it sickness, God forbid, be it financial, be it a myriad loss of challenges. But when we stand under the chuppah, like all of the joyous occasions of life, I think we're called upon to put all the challenges of life aside and focus on the blessing. And I say lahavdil, when we go to a shiva house, it's one of the hardest things to be present in a shiva house, because you have to take all your happiness and all your blessing and put it away and come in with an open heart, what Chazal call nosei be'olim chavero, to come in where a person's experienced the most tragic death and just be with them. Try and help them work through their pain. That's why you don't have to say anything. There's nothing to say. Well, what are you going to say? All you can do is open your heart to be present and to try and hold a small amount of the immeasurable pain that people are going through. It's hard. And therefore, just like the human, we are called upon in halakha to just open our heart to carry pain with the person going through it. So too in the wedding and in simchas, we have to open our heart to simcha. And the thing I've spoken a lot about, I've seen, and I really believe it's true. I'll mention this, it's my drosha, I'm a rabbi, I've got to give a drosha. And in Ecclesiastes, in Kohelet, Shlomo HaMelech says in chapter 3, he says, L'kol zman va'et, for all times, right? Eit lamut va'et lichyot, a time of death and a time of life. Eit lischok va'et livkot, a time for cry and a time to rejoice. Eit lintoa va'et lakor natoa, a time to plant, a time to uproot. So until our occurrences, I always thought that these were two different times. I thought what Shlomo HaMelech is saying, in life there's different times. There's a season of joy, there's a season of... I think what Shlomo HaMelech may be saying is that the true wisdom of life is to know that life is full of all these seasons at the same time. And the challenge of the wise person, the wise-hearted, which is what Shlomo is, Leiv Chacham Umevin, what Shlomo HaMelech davens for. When he davens to be king, he says, he asks Hashem to give him a leiv chacham umevin, to give him a heart which truly understands. And I think an understanding heart is an expansive heart, which knows that at a time of happiness, the wisdom of life is to put aside everything else, put it down in its place, and at that season of life, bring out the happiness. And at the difficult times of life, such as in a shiva house, where the appropriate thing is to cry and to feel pain and to be in that moment with somebody else where you're sharing enormous pain. And if we are truly empathetic, how can we go in and out of a shiva house business as usual? We have to take on some of the pain that people are going through. That's what we're called upon to do. It's very difficult, but I think that's the malacha, that's the avodah ruchanit, the spiritual work, to know at what season what to put away and what to bring out. So I really believe, unfortunately, having been through it ourselves, well, fortunately having a wedding, but unfortunately under those circumstances, it's possible to carry both together. And it's possible in happy times to be happy. And as you correctly said, none of us can truly be happy until the final redemption, because the world's incomplete. How can you have fullness of heart when the world's incomplete? And hence, we break a cup under the chuppah, because even at that moment of total fullness of heart and completeness, the world's not complete. There is pain. There's something broken. There's something really broken in the world and fractured. So I think Chazal, in their wisdom, have managed to capture during the wedding the sentiment of the pain and the incompleteness at the moment of our happiness. And so I think Chazal have asked us to do that, and I think it is possible to do.
I'm sure this collective experience, this collective tragedy for the Jewish people will change how people feel about what it means to be Jewish and their Jewish story in the land of Israel. For Jews who are, less knowledgeable of their Jewish identity, how do you think this experience, October 7th, and everything that's going on will change them?
I think that sometimes when we're distant from the destiny of the Jewish people, either because life circumstances have caused us sort of to be, let's say, distant and not so much involved in the Jewish community, I think now and then we get these very, very painful and harsh wake-up calls. Who could have ever imagined two things that have happened in the last couple of months? That the state of Israel in the what's called the Gaza envelope would have become the most dangerous place for Jews since the Shoah, with 1,200 people being butchered in the most horrific possible ways. And for a day, so to speak, there was this darkness and pain. Who could have imagined that such, somebody had said in some ways it's worse than the Nazis, not in terms obviously of the scope, nothing, but the Nazis tried their best to hide what they were doing. Their whole propaganda machine was that the world shouldn't believe that these things are going on. And here are people walking around with GoPros doing the most horrific actions, which were, for sure were pre-planned. There was nothing spur of the moment about the acts. The plans have been found, and this we heard from the leadership. The hostage parents heard this from the country's leadership. These were all premeditated and pre-planned, everything that was done, the torturing and all the terrible things. So, and then to publicize it with GoPros, it's just unimaginable that human beings are capable of sort of such atrocities. And I think for us as Jews, who have taught the world from the beginning of Bereshit that all human beings are created in the image of God, and all human life is of endless importance and infinite importance, because we believe that everyone has a part of God in them and therefore has infinite godly importance. For us to witness such horrific subhuman actions are just so hard to believe that it can happen in the 21st century and happen to us. And secondly, to see the outpouring in so many circles of anti-Semitism, where people, seemingly fair-minded people, cannot unapologetically, blatantly call out Hamas for these horrific actions that still there's a but and it's got some type of political. It absolutely boggles the mind. And how long it's taken for women organizations to come out, really? Here are people which have been tortured, raped in the most horrific ways, and it takes 2 months to even come out with a condemnation. And therefore, I think it does highlight in some ways the aloneness or the uniqueness of the Jewish experience. I know of many, many people in our own family and beyond who sort of been relatively unaffiliated. And it sparked something of, wow, we're Jewish. And This has happened to the Jewish country. And people still cannot, I really believe that most people are fair-minded and honest and decent people. And many people are also ignorant. But there are these evil forces in the world which are so barbaric and inhumane that have absolutely no respect for the most basic human morality. And somehow this finds a voice and takes root, and somehow the Jewish people are the recipients of such hypocrisy. In all other conflicts around the world, there's 1,000,001 condemnations and 1,000,001 different, groups which affiliate. And all of a sudden over here, the Jews are in many ways left alone. I do believe that has sparked a level of arousing a Jewish spark. But our Jewish identity cannot and dare not be just a result of a negative arousing. The positive side of anti-Semitism is there is something special about the Jewish people, not in a condescending way, not in a way which affords us rights that other people don't have, maybe certain responsibilities that we've always felt of having. We've always felt, I think, as the children of Abraham, of having some type of message of life and light for the world, of uplifting all of humanity, and certainly not in a condescending way, but in a unifying and uplifting way. And I think, and I hope, that those whose Jewish identity and has been aroused, it can translate into Jewish destiny to do their bit for the Jewish people. That wanting to be an agent of change and positivity in the world is not a contradiction to a very strong Jewish identity. You can have a very strong particularist affiliation to the Jewish people, which in no way undermines the more universal message of Tikkun Olam. On the contrary, the Jewish people are the last people who will give up on the dignity of the human experience. And nothing that Hamas have done has made us lose our faith in humanity. Yes, lose perhaps our faith in certain elements of humanity, to see how evil can take root once again, how Nazism could take root and do the horrific things that it does. And now Islamic fundamentalist terrorism has also taken root in certain places around the world and is able to commit in the name of God the most horrific actions which would make many of the Nazis proud. And this has to be called out. This has to be opposed. We have to have moral clarity. And as the Jewish people, I think we've got a historic role to play, because we know, as has often been said, what happens to the Jewish people never ends with the Jewish people. And that's the time of Hanukkah now, and I will always quote in Hanukkah a lady, Margaret Mead. She was an American anthropologist. She passed away in 1978. And I read something she wrote. She said, people say that a few people cannot change the world. She said, human history bears out that it's the only thing that ever has. When a small group of people get together in any area, if you take any area of human endeavor, it's always been a small group of people, deeply mission-driven and connected to wanting to make a difference. That's the only thing which has ever made a difference. And to me, Jewish history is about that. It's about one small family. We're reading now the book of Bereshit. It's one small family, Aram and Sarah and their children, and Yitzchak and Rivka and their children, and Yaakov and his wives and their children, which became Bnei Israel. And this one family, the children of one person, became, in the book of Shmot, Am Bnei Israel. And this tiny people, as it says in Devarim, Deuteronomy, V'atem hama'at mikol ha'amim, you're amongst the smallest of nations in the world, yet look at the impact that the Jewish people have had. And therefore, to be part of the Jewish people, for me, is to be part of a tradition of a very small people who are able, through the blessing of Hashem, to have a tremendous impact. So we need every one of our people. We cannot afford to lose any. And therefore, anyone whose life, that pintele yid, that spark that has been aroused now, should be a flame that brings them to contribute to the world through contributing to the Jewish people, its unity and integrity, its Jewish values. And through that, I believe we can have a much bigger impact in the world.
I speak to a lot of different people who have experienced, from October 7th, different things. Somebody from Kibbutz Adumim and how she survived that, the attacks there. And I always like to ask what they think is Yisrael's biggest power or greatest strength at this time. And, I've had lots of different answers. The recurring theme is obviously the unity, and like you mentioned, but I'm curious what you think are, our strongest advantage right now.
I think that, to my mind, the greatest quality that has come out since October 7th is the Jewish people's readiness across the board to sacrifice for the Jewish people. People from around Israel and all around the world have been prepared to put their lives on hold. Soldiers, the spirit, the one thing I keep hearing from all the heads of the country, is the spirit of the nation which is now, is a desire to put everyone, to put their lives on the line, to defend the Jewish people, to defend the state of Israel, to bring back every one of the hostages, to ensure that this evil never happens again. There's a readiness at the moment for incredible self-sacrifice, of putting the needs of the Jewish people before anything else. And that's across the board, from right to left, from religious to irreligious. Everyone is prepared from Israel and around the world to put things on hold and to sacrifice for the greater good. So to my mind, the word is mesirut nefesh, the ability with incredible grit, determination, commitment to the self-sacrifice of Jewish destiny, to my mind is, I think we've surprised ourselves. I think we've forgotten what a people we are. We have taught the world the value of one human life, of one Jewish life. No people is prepared to do the things that we prepare to do for another Jewish and human life. We care about the children in Gaza a lot more than Hamas do, a lot more. Which normative people is prepared to put all of their military apparatus amongst the most exposed kindergartens, schools, and old-aged homes. And we are called upon to do this impossible task of trying to defend ourselves while having to, value the lives of their civilians more than they do as well. Yet that is being part of the Jewish people. Being part of the Jewish people is part of a people who are so united, so believe in life and in light and in God. And that's we are one. So I think that's what's come out over here. I think the enemies of Israel really got this wrong. They looked at Israel like they always do, like Haman does, and sees a totally disunited people arguing with each other. Both Nasrallah from Lebanon, from the Hezbollah, and Sinwar, Yamach Shemam, these Rishaim have both spoken about the weakness of the Jewish people, the disunity of the Jewish people, and they've got this totally wrong. All they've done is, with tremendous pain and wounded us, but they've done is strengthened us, because they've brought out who we truly are. We are one people, which when push comes to shove, have an unbelievable self-sacrifice for the other and care about each other more than words can express. And it's my hope and prayer that this unity, this heroism, this self-sacrifice one for the other that has come out in a time of challenge must remain with us going forward.
To finish off, with everything going on, has there been one instance, anecdote, interaction that stands out as something powerful, something inspirational, something you'd like to share?
The most powerful thing is for us as a family is to see how many people, hundreds, thousands, if not tens of thousands, have expressed, heartfelt prayers, davening for our son, amongst the other hostages. And if I can, just mention his name, if people can daven for him, his name is Daniel Shimon Ben Sharon. And we also know that unfortunately on the day that he was sort of taken captive, he was also injured. Thankfully, the blood doesn't indicate of necessity a fatal, God forbid, injury, but he was injured. So to daven for his rufat haguf, his healthy physical recovery, his rufat nefesh, that he should be well emotionally and speedily return with all of the captors. So many people have done and continue to do acts of just thousands of acts, whether it be prayers, whether it be hafrashat challah, whether it be donating so many things to the IDF in his, people all around the world send us pictures and say, we've given this to the Israeli army in the merit of Daniel. So I think these acts of people, just some that we know more, some that we don't know at all, just being prepared to do so much for somebody they don't know, is an incredible thing for us as a family, and I think a sign of who the Jewish people are. Life is stronger than death. Our love of life, and part of Hashem, which is Hamelech Chafetz B'chaim, as we say, who desires life. We wake up in the morning and we say, Modeh ani lefanecha Melech Chai v'kayam. God is the living God. Melech kel Chai ha'olamim. God is the God of life and the bestower of life, and we are agents of life and light and hope. And life is stronger than death. Agents who, such as the Jewish people who believe in life, will overcome those who celebrate death. And please God, on a micro and a macro level of being part of our people at this time will be one where for our family on a personal level, where we deeply hope and daven every day for the return of Daniel with all of the other hostages, there should be, and we hope and pray for the healing of all of the injured and all the hundreds of thousands of soldiers, that all of them should return with healthy in all ways, that ultimately life will transcend and overcome death.